in section 1E, we're going to basically reverse what we learned in 1B. So in 1B, we learned how to get it from a fraction to a decimal to a percent. And in 1E, we're going to learn how to get back to a decimal if we're given a percent. So before we go into converting percent to decimal, let's recall what we got in 1B, which was when you start with a decimal, which is the amount divided by the total, we can change that to a percent by multiplying by 100 and adding the percent symbol. That's essentially multiplying by 100%. That's essentially it, multiplying by 1. So we're not changing the value, we're just changing the form. So now what happens to convert it back to a percent? Let's reverse that thinking and undo the multiplication. We're going to divide. That's the opposite of multiplication, is division. So if we're given the percentage and we want the decimal, then we can just remove the percent sign and divide by 100. Let's look at an example. So for our first example, we're going to start with 29.5%. And to make that into a decimal, you may remember a trick about moving the decimal left 2 or right 2 points, but you might not remember if it's left or right, and that's where it gets a little tricky. Really common to move it the wrong direction, and then you get the wrong answer. So it saves some stress by just multiplying or dividing rather than worrying about moving the decimal. So let's look at our calculator. And we're going to take that 29.5, remove the percent sign, and divide by 100. And we get 0.295. And maybe you already got that answer by in your head moving the decimal left. Here's an example of where it gets a little tricky to just move the decimal. If we start with 0.97% and we want to convert that to a decimal, a common error would move it the wrong way and get 97% as your answer, or 97 as your decimal. But we want to move it left. We're dividing by 100% in decimal, which means our number is going to get smaller. So I'm going to clear my calculator and I'm going to start with 0.97%, but the first step is remove that percent symbol and divide by 100. So my decimal moved left, and I get 0.0097 as my decimal. Now another example of where moving the decimal gets a little tricky is whole numbers. When I get a whole number like this, then some students don't remember where that decimal is, and the answer to that is 5% is the same thing as 5.0%. Those are equivalent. So now moving our decimal, we're going to think divide by 100. So I'm going to clear my calculator, do 5%, remove the percent sign, and divide by 100. And I get for my decimal. So if we just divide by 100, then we don't have to worry about moving the decimal the right or the wrong way. So that's one tip. If you feel very confident in moving the decimal, then go right ahead. All right. Now for our last example, let's think back to 1B and remember the decimal proportion was given to us by the amount divided by the total. So the amount of people that have a certain trait divided by the total number of people in the group. So we can rearrange this and we can find that the reason we want to find decimals is because I can stick a decimal into this equation and stick it in the calculator, much easier than dealing with percentages. So if I want to find the amount of people that have a certain trait, then I can take the proportion, which is the decimal, and multiply it by the total number of people in that group. So let's look at an example of that. Okay, so in this example, according to the Center of Disease Control, CDC, about 32% of Americans have hypertension. That is our proportion. According to suburbanstats.org, Tulsa, Oklahoma has approximately 603,403 people living in it. That is a total size of the group we're looking at. If the CDC is correct, 32% of Americans have hypertension, then we're going to use that data to look at just Tulsa. Then how many people do we expect to have hypertension in Tulsa? So the first step is to get that proportion to be in a decimal so I can use it in the other equation. So my first step is to look at this 32%. And to get that to be a decimal, I want to divide by 100. So I'm going to clear my calculator. 32 divided by 100 gives me a decimal. Okay, now I can use my decimal in this equation. Let's see if I can get the right color here. Okay, so my amount then, I still have red here. Okay, that's better. Okay, so our amount, we're looking for the amount. This right here. How many people do we expect to have hypertension in Tulsa? That is the amount. How many? How many people? That's amount. That's what we're looking for. So the answer to that's going to be the decimal. The 32, that's the proportion of Americans that have hypertension, and the times the total. And the total number of people in Tulsa is that. So now I'm going to get my handy dandy calculator. I already have my 0.32 in there. Multiply that by the number of people in Tulsa, 403. And I get my amount is 193 and 80. I'm going to call that 89 people. So I'm going to round off to the whole number since it's people. So the proportion of people that with hypertension is 32%. So that 0.32 times the total number of people in Tulsa gives me the proportion of people that have hypertension in Tulsa, or an estimation of that. That's how we can expect.